Hello everyone, today we're gonna see why being born as a T-Rex was a lonely start. Imagine you hatch from an egg, you're a confused little dino, but there's no one around, your mom's nowhere to be found. You're thinking to yourself, where's my mom? Is she some giant hunter out there eating breakfast right now? So you get up, start looking for her, and on the way, you find a chunk of meat. At least you won't starve. Now that our little T-Rex has eaten his meat, he thinks, gotta find my mom. His legs are chick-sized, and he waddles like a drunk duck. He keeps going and sees dinos eating their grass, living peacefully with no worries at all. Suddenly, he pushes through the bushes and finds his mom. Oh no, she's eating his siblings like they're chips. He thinks to himself, they said family matters, but not like this. But then his mom looks up, sees him, and says, "You're my only kid, I won't hurt you." Little T-Rex breathes a sigh of relief and goes to her. His mom brings him fresh prey every day. Life gets sweet for him, just eating and sleeping until he slowly gets bigger and stronger. One morning he wakes up, looks at his mom, and says, "Time to live my own life." With his stronger legs, he heads off alone into the jungle. No more mom or ready-made meals. He thinks to himself, now that I'm big, I'm my own boss. But I wish someone still brought me food. He stops for a sec, looks at his legs, and says, these aren't chick legs anymore, they're monster feet. Then he looks at his arms and thinks, whoa, these are huge arms now, I'm like Arnold in the jungle. He stands next to a tree, measures his height, and says, with this physique, it's hunting time. He heads off to hunt, spots a poor dino, and finishes it off quick. He eats his prey and, with a full belly, says, now that I'm strong, let's take a stroll and see who's boss. As he walks, he spots two other T-Rexes fighting each other. He stops in a corner and starts watching like a curious spectator, just missing some popcorn. He watches for a moment and says, this noise isn't for me, I'm off to do my own thing. He keeps going and suddenly sees some dinos walking together in pairs, like happy couples. He looks at them with envy and thinks, I want a partner too, to get out of this loneliness. He makes up his mind and starts looking around, searching for another T-Rex to be his road buddy. Suddenly he spots a cool-looking T-Rex, goes up and says, hi, wanna be my partner? But it just gives him a cold stare and walks off. He thinks to himself, well, clearly I'm not cool enough yet, I gotta improve myself. He starts working out, lifting big rocks and pumping iron to get a strong, buff body. He decides lifting rocks isn't enough, so he starts running through the jungle, like he's in the Dino Olympics. Every morning he gets up, runs a few laps, and lifts rocks until his muscles are hard as mountains. He thinks to himself, now that I've built this body, no T-Rex can turn me down. He struts through the jungle with giant confidence, like he's the new king around here. Other dinos stare at him and whisper, who's this guy with those muscles? He thinks to himself, time to find a partner again. This time, no one's saying no. He stops for a moment and says, wait a sec, who's even worthy of me? He looks at his muscles with pride and thinks, I'm this awesome. Can't just pick anyone as my partner. He decides to raise his standards and search for a truly special T-Rex. Suddenly, a bunch of T-Rexes gather around him, like it's a dino blind date show, all wanting to be his partner. The first one steps up and says, I'm strong, pick me, but he says, nah, you sweat too much, next. The second one roars and says, I'm a hunter, we'd match, but he replies, nope, not feeling it. Pass. The third one struts up and says, my teeth are sharp, you won't find a better partner, but he says, nah, you brag too much, next. The fourth one comes up quietly and says, I'm chill, we'd have a good life, but he gets, no, you're too boring, rejected. The fifth one shows up with prey in its mouth and says, I'll get you food, but he says, nope, I'm a hunter myself, pass. He rejects all the T-Rexes and thinks to himself, well, looks like no one's up to my level. He walks through the jungle with pride, like a king who hasn't finished building his kingdom. But then he stops and wonders, now what? Being alone is getting a bit too boring. He decides to try something new, maybe find a hobby to fill his lonely time. He starts stacking rocks into weird shapes, like he's launching a dino sculpture career. He thinks to himself, if I don't find a partner, at least I'll build a museum for others to visit. But then he sits down and thinks, this loneliness is driving me nuts, sculptures didn't save me either. Suddenly he looks up and sees another T-Rex passing by, whoa, his heart skips a beat, and he thinks, this is the one I've been waiting for. He gets up with confidence and heads toward it, like he's about to win a Dino blind date. He says, "Hey, I'm the cool T-Rex you've been looking for," but the other T-Rex just glances at him and keeps walking. He thinks to himself, "Wait a sec, how can they reject me? I need a better plan." He decides to show off, so he starts chasing a big prey to flex his skills. After a ton of effort, he catches the prey, drops it in front of the other T-Rex, and says, "Look, I got this for you." But the other T-Rex just sniffs it and says, "Thanks, but I'm a hunter too," and walks off. Our T-Rex is stunned and thinks, "What kind of rejection is this? I was a masterpiece." He looks at his prey and says, "Well, at least I've got a killer lunch, who needs them anyway?" But deep down he's a little sad and thinks, maybe I need to win them over a different way. He sits down for a moment and says to himself, "Wait, I've come this far, why stress myself out?" He decides to embrace his solitude, picks up his prey, and says, "Me and this meat, we're the best partners." With a big smile, he strolls through the jungle at sunset, realizing sometimes you're your own best buddy.